what you know about a certain culture, your first reaction is to probably think of certain holidays. And while that impulse might feel a bit childish at first, it's actually an excellent window into understanding what average life for a particular society was like. Yes, this is going to be a video that will mostly look at why these recent updates are centered around the history behind celebrating different seasons. So if you were here for me to rant about the missed opportunities because of how broken these updates have been, well, I don't know, man. Have some tea, chill out. You might actually learn something. And this is big here. You may also give the devs the benefit of the doubt, because this is an extremely interesting, relatively new, idea for a video game, and it has a lot of potential in the future when it comes to immersive settings. Proving Ubisoft has real intentions to make concepts like pagan seasons and cultural practices a priority is no easy task. For many, using these seasons as titles for post-launch updates appear on the surface as nothing more than clever titles, or as an excuse to sell trendy items in the in-game store. So to change that perception, we have to head back into the main story and talk about Halloween.
Trick or treat!
So, you're doing a little trick-or-treating.
At this point in the game's story, when, about 90% of people were probably either on their phones or skipping through these cutscenes altogether, the plot thickens when Eivor visits Gloucestershire on the first night of Samhain. It's pronounced Samhain, even though it looks like Samhain. It's Gaelic, and so is Gunnar's wife, who you meet when the questline begins. Maybe this is my one and only excuse to talk about my love for this history behind Halloween, so here goes.
No, you're going to tell a story. I don't believe that I can bear to listen to another one of your stories right now.
I want to make both my Irish ancestors and my neighbors over in Salem, Massachusetts, the Halloween capital of the world, proud.
But everyone here knows that Halloween was invented by the candy companies. It's a conspiracy.
It just so happens that Halloween is based on the ancient feast called All Hallows Eve. It's the one night of the year where the spirits of the dead can return to Earth.
People think this movie is dated. There's rarely a school year where I don't encounter both of these types of students in the same class. Anyway, they're both wrong and right. This holiday is pretty complicated, so let's get into it. First off, it has to be acknowledged that there aren't really many great sources to help historians envision an ancient Halloween. This goes for Yule and Ostara as well, which can be frustrating, but deeply revealing. Take some of our earliest written sources that describe how the Celts celebrated Samhain. For example, it's Roman, and of the time of Julius Caesar, specifically. Here we have some classic misconceptions about paganism. Human sacrifice, god of death, evil spirits. Lovely. Really tells us how objective their thoughts on Germanic tribes were, The problem here is that this is clearly propaganda, meant to quite literally demonize a specific culture, which the Romans were known for doing quite a bit. And 17th and 18th century folklorists are right on board with this loose or inaccurate interpretation. So these problems, well, they only get exacerbated over time.
Now, what does exacerbate mean?
It means, to make things worse.
Right.
So how's Assassin's Creed's rendition of Samhain?
From all over to celebrate Samhain. Most are too busy with the festivities to pay us mind.
Samhain? Is that what these carved roots are for? This tradition?
Aye. Faces cut into lanterns to ward off evil spirits and guide children home.
They have a haunted look about them. Let us bring a few back.
My lady love calls, Eivor. Oh, if you'd like to join us later, we're going hoodening this eve.
Go, may you have a fire-forged friendship. Watch for fairies, fenfolk, and fiends. I have a hand fastening to oversee, an apprenticeship to officiate, and a pig to slaughter.
Samhain. Kunon humors these pagans too much. It is the first thing gone when I'm Elderman. Fires and magic, spirits in the air. Gloucestershire has strayed from God's light.
People need carousing, especially before the winter frost. A festival brings warmth and cheer.
God's light does not dim as the nights chill, but the winters are hard upon the children. Seeing them run around,
it lightens the heart.
Gloucester gives their glut to otherworldly visitors, and if you dress as one, you'll get that bounty yourself.
Freely given? I've only seen such a thing done at feasts.
Then we turn you into a beastie and have you roam the hills, braying for sweets and drink.
Alright, that's enough for now. There's so much to unpack here. It's no accident that this feast surrounds an interesting political strife. In many Celtic stories, Samhain is frequently a time when members of a governing body meet for varying reasons. Also woven into the plot, a Catholic who isn't particularly thrilled about the celebration. This is obviously a nod to the name Halloween being shortened from All Hallows Eve, the Eve of All Saints and All Souls Day. It's an edgy point of a lot of keyboard historians to make on the internet these days when talking about the similarities between Catholic and pagan holidays, saying something like Catholics stole this particular ancient holiday.
No. Pardon me?
But the historical answer has much more to do with cultural assimilation. Since many of these cultures would eventually convert to Christianity, they simply held on to many of their traditions, especially when they had to do with harvests or taxes. A big reason why many historians believe that there is a link to Samhain and a Celtic-like New Year. There's also no substantial evidence that connects Celtic monks to Pope Boniface choosing these specific dates. So this theory is mostly based on correlation, not causation. Constantine kind of set the tone for this sort of thing, you know? Moving on. There's mentions of this being a highly spiritual time with fairies and monsters and such, which would align nicely with Celtic mythology, like the story of Cullen, a Celtic hero who accidentally kills two fairies on Samhain and is punished ruthlessly for it. Or the adventure of Nera. On a night in Samhain, a dead man in this particular story comes back to life. But no mention of an evil or god of death, as many other forms of media often do. There's only one line about sacrifice, and it's in regards to animals and not people. Another more accurate interpretation that doesn't continue the long-held belief that this is a devil-worshipping kind of celebration. Okay, that's a lot of things AC Valhalla just got right, and you probably think I'm a simp. You want me to nitpick? Alright, let's nitpick. The actual trick-or-treating isn't a phrase that's used until 1927. There, you feel better? So yeah, this part is historically ridiculous, but even that is kinda awesome. This guy is explaining how they can give you some cake, which is a cool reference to soul cakes. But these wouldn't be a thing for a few hundred years. In fact, the whole debate on which culture inspired going door to door to receive treats is actually pretty heated. From a Celtic perspective, this could be in reference to appeasing spirits during this time, but many other historians believe that this tradition actually stemmed from offering prayers to neighbors for the loss of a loved one, and thus not existing until Christianity was introduced to the region. Either way, it wouldn't be a hoodening, but a mumming, where people would go door to door, singing and or performing different skits, which sounds a lot more like Christmas caroling. I promise, we're getting to the Yule update soon. So accuracy-wise, this level is clearly a blend of ancient practices of Samhain, late Middle Age customs, and more 19th and 20th century elements. Why then is it still awesome? It's about the message. The theme that these traditions are changing is coded right into the game. It's like when you watch a documentary like Super Size Me, you realize that a lot of it's fabricated, but it's hard to hate on it because at the end of the day, despite its flaws, it opened people's eyes to the dangers of the growth of fast food. Valhalla here has a fun interpretation of Halloween that's careful not to insult or rehash misconceptions. If your biggest takeaway is that this is a holiday that's really morphed over time, then mission accomplished. I could talk more about this. The turnip carving is accurate, and the holiday as a whole took on new growth after the Irish potato famine, led to massive amounts of Irish immigrants in the United States. But let's get into some of the seasonal updates. Updates that follow the same principle, actually. Create a fun interpretation of important cultural celebrations. The biggest difference between Yule / Ostara and Samhain is that these feasts take place in the settlement, a clever feature that makes for more immersion. I find one of the biggest problems with open worlds is that they often don't feel very lived in. Like the inhabitants just kind of do the same thing over and over again, caught in a loop, say the same lines over and over again. It's like it's Westworld.
Doesn't look like anything to me.
So, bringing in a holiday...
It's Christmas. Need the holidays to show time is still moving.
It's a great way to show these characters reacting to their environment in a believable way. And outside of fun costumes around certain holidays, it is baffling more games don't do this. I was pumped to see how the settlement would change during a season which historically saw a lot of change through the introduction of winter. So let's see how Ubisoft did. The team's first attempt at this was Yule, pronounced Yule in some northern cultures. And it's another excellent tradition that still lives on today. Like Samhain, Yule is an important time for feasting and sacrificing, most notably animals that would be hard to keep in high numbers over the course of a harsh winter. However, in accordance with Old Norse culture, this is a particularly important time for setting goals and boasting about your plans for the future. This is evident most famously in the sagas when Ragnar Lothbrok claims that he will conquer England with just 2 boats. This boast takes on an almost sacred meaning if it's made during the Yule feast, similar to how people set goals throughout the year, but their New Year's resolution, that's often the one that they take most seriously. Is there any pledging or goal setting going on during Valhalla's Yule? Well, not really. I envisioned this historical feature as like Eivor claiming that he would do something that has to do with the upcoming DLCs, way to hype up future content and also express the importance of the tradition in the process. Could have been interesting, but it's a time for togetherness too, so is there much of that in the Yule update? Well, there's new dialogue, so that's cool. How could we infuse this with history better? How about an emotional connection with a clan member who's lost a family member and is having a tough time? Be realistic. How would you make that in a gameplay? Look, I don't know. Maybe you console him. He's crying, and
If he cries, you cry harder, man.
I'm trying here. You want another nitpick? You got it. Garland wasn't used as a significant decorative until many immigrants heightened the use of this tradition in the US. So, yeah, another blend with today's version of celebrating Yule. Anyway, the setting looks cool in the snow. More of this, please and thank you. On to Ostara. So obviously this has many connections to Easter, and there's an egg hunt kind of thing.
Easter, the day Jesus rose from the dead, what should we do?
How about eggs?
There's fun nods to this being a season of fertility, but playing through this was a bit of a nightmare, so my effort to explain this time period will probably be pretty weak. Speaking of pretty weak, you know what's annoying? A lot of people say that Ostara is like the Easter goddess, and those connections are mostly based on those same folklorists who are getting things wrong yet again. Aside from the names sounding similar, there's really nothing that makes historians think Ostara and Easter are linked. There are lots of similarities between how these seasons are celebrated across the world. Many cultures just use similar symbols around the same times because, well, that's just kind of how it is.
It is what it is.
Halloween is a time when food becomes more scarce, hence a lot of cultures light bonfires and have harvests. Winter is a time when people are stuck indoors, and hence the greenery, and spring is when flowers bloom, and...
How about eggs?
Yeah. If that was an underwhelming way to end things, then let me leave you with this. Just because the origins of these traditions lack sources, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be important, even celebrated. So these updates are a great reminder that history is a lot closer than it seems, that our traditions are important. Valhalla understands this, and I appreciate their commitment to bring me back to the settlement for these very reasons. In summary, I can't wait for the Midsummer update. Odin isn't Santa Claus. And let's cut Ubisoft some slack and enjoy the updates. They're a heck of a lot more than we've gotten for Marvel's The Avengers. See you all in the DLC.